Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Gametime app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat presented by Gametime. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That's Carl Corazzini. Carl, what is up?
I don't have my whiteboard, though, and I'm very disappointed that we're not going to get the opportunity to spend some time together late at night dissecting the 1-2-2 in the playoffs. Like, what are our fans going to do without that?
I don't know. I think people have missed it. I said to you before we came on, I've gotten so many messages and comments from people throughout the year being like, are we not going to get Carl this year? Or like, how are we going to do no post-game show? And it is fun. I mean, you and I would sit there the last 2 years, sometimes until 12 a.m., 12:30, just talking about this stuff. And people always tuned in and people were awesome in the comments. And it's unfortunate that there will be none of that this year, but I have you here. This is a regular podcast, not quite a live stream, but it is a podcast. And maybe we'll have you a little on throughout the spring and the summer, whenever you can fix it in your fit it in your busy schedule. Before we start, St. Mark's hockey, hell of a year.
Yeah. I will give our kids a lot of credit. We were a fairly young group this year. I think in the past we've probably had 4 or 5, top end guys that carried us, and this year it was really a team collective. First time that they've ever made it to the Elite Eight. So they had a great year.
Number 2 seed in the Elite Eight. So for those who don't follow prep, that's the second best team in New England. So that's a big thing.
And then we lose in the first round. Right. Like in all fairness, right? Like, great job to Rivers and Freddie there. But that first line, Carter Meyer, Finn Sears, and Sam Pandolfo, like, we just had no answer for them all year. And there's a reason they made the National Development Program. And I am glad to see them gone.
I'm not surprised. I think a lot of prep coaches are. I've said this a couple times on here. I wonder when we start talking about them, if the Bruins are in the hunt in 2027 for a high draft pick, and we're like, should the Bruins draft Carter Meyer, or if they have like a mid first round pick or something, or a late first round pick or a second, should they draft Finn Sears? Should they draft Sam Pandolfo? So I'm looking forward to that day when we can really put that knowledge to the test.
Yeah, this is what I'll always say, or I've said. I've been doing this 11 years, and certainly there's never been a better all freshman line than that. But for Carter to have dominated prep hockey the way he did, like 41 goals as a 15-year-old. You had to go back. I think Jay O'Brien, who was a senior and was drafted in the first round, I think 2017, 2018, something like that.
Yep.
I think he might have had 40, but to score 40 in general in prep hockey is really hard. And then for Carter to do that as a 15-year-old, I mean, he dominated games, and it was really hard to account for him. And you would assume with the 3 of them, if they continue to develop with the trajectory that they have and the competitiveness that they have as well in the hockey IQ. Yeah. I mean, it'd be great for a fan base to be able to watch any one of those 3 playing for the Bruins.
Absolutely. And obviously Sam Pandolfo has the last name that I think Bruins fans would be excited about. Bruins wise,
maybe for another reason too.
That's right.
Another reason too.
That's right. I see what you're getting at there.
Yeah.
Coaching his own kid, not just at BU, but potentially with the Bruins.
Maybe
make that happen.
Maybe. Yeah.
No playoffs this year. You and I texted throughout the year quite a bit, what was going on with this team and this and that. What happened? What, in your estimation, happened with this team?
Well, I think the lack of a true number 1 center is really difficult. I think you look at all the good teams across the league, your strength is down the middle. You most certainly didn't have a number 1 centerman this year. And in the past, right, like you look at that 22-23 team, you could go 3 deep and even at an advanced age with Bergeron, Krejci, and then Charlie Coyle was down on the third line, and not having a true number 1 center forces people to play out of position. And by position, I mean up in the lineup. And that's really, really difficult. And especially early on, and I know someone will fact check me. I'm not right. Like, I'm teaching and coaching baseball here right now. I'm not scouring the internet, but you look at the power play early in the year and you're able to key on Pastrnak and they're taking that away. Like,
I think that's fact. That doesn't need to be checked. That's true.
Okay, good. Thanks. Like, he's your number one threat. Obviously, he still ends up with 102 points, which speaks to him being a superstar in the National Hockey League and deserved of, like, as much as they did not have team success, he should get some MVP votes just to be able to do what he did. But lack of a number one center. Your UFAs didn't perform the way that you would expect it, and you can't blame management. Like, they went out and spent money trying to do what they thought was best to help build this team. The UFAs didn't perform. That's, it could be just a transition of the year. And then Swayman and Ullmark had something special, and maybe asking, especially in year one, Swayman to play a majority of the games, maybe that really hurt. And you probably took for granted Swayman and Ullmark being able to go every other night for the course of the year and even into the playoffs at some times. And I think those three things together, lack of a number one center, your UFA is not performing, and then Swayman being asked to carry the load, that was a recipe for what you got this year.
Yeah, I keep going back to, I think it was a perfect storm of bad. It was just a lot of things went wrong. I mean, you go back to camp, and I think you nail it with the lack of a number one center. Elias Lindholm was brought in to be the number one center. And I certainly thought going into the year, hey, put him with Pastrnak, they're going to fit great. It's going to be, he's not Patrice Bergeron. He's not obviously as good as him, but he can play a similar role. He can play bumper on the power play. He can be a two-way guy. If you can get 65, 70 points out of him, get power play works with Pastrnak, that should be doable. And it wasn't. And you saw throughout the year, like you mentioned 2023, of how guys were in their correct spots throughout the lineup. They were supposed to be this year and they weren't. And I think that really stemmed from Lindholm not working. I mean, you had to move Zacha back to the middle. Geeky's back in the top six. Now that ends up works great. But still, I think going into the year, we thought Geeky would be a third liner. Turns out to be your second best player. But I think that was the first big thing. And that trickle down of that was big, because then the power play started to struggle because Lindholm couldn't really fit in there. And I do think it's encouraging that at the end of the year, Lindholm did seem to find some chemistry with Pastrnak. I don't know if I'm ready yet when we do our lineup projections for next year to be like, oh, Lindholm's definitely back with Pastrnak and Geeky, and you don't have to worry about them. I don't think we're there, but it is encouraging that he worked with him at the end of the year. But I think that was a big one. I also think when it comes to Swayman, and we've talked about this a lot, it was also the perfect storm. Bad for him. Sat out all of camp. Gets thrust in, doesn't really have any games to warm up. College shots are not NHL shots. And he was sort of underwater the whole year. Now, he didn't play well. So it's on him too. I'm not blaming other people or anything, but first year with a big workload, one of the most contentious public contractual negotiations we've seen in a long time around here of both sides throwing words at each other. And it didn't help that the defense in front of him was bad.
Yeah.
They were horrendous defensively this year, and there were lots of injuries. And that's why I don't think, I'm not as worried about Swayman going forward as others are. I think there are a lot of people who are like, this contract stinks. If you can get him off the books, no, I don't think that's, if he does this next year, I think we're sitting here next year going, all right, there's a big problem here. I'm not nearly there, given what he had to go through this year.
No, I'm not there. I still think he's one of the better goalies in the National Hockey League and someone that you would like to build around at his age, but you can't, part of the problem was not being in camp, right? However that plays out.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. 100%.
Right?
Oh yeah.
However that plays out from a contractual standpoint, looking at both sides, not being in camp affected him. Now, there was plenty of time to regroup, getting shots, right? Like he hopped in right into that first game, playing at the National Hockey League level, and now there was enough time to get yourself right. Now, the one thing that it may do, and I know people don't think about this, but it becomes the mental side of it, right? Like, even if a small thing enters your mind, like from his standpoint, and again, I'm not saying that this happened, but like, did I make the right decision? Should I have been in camp? I'm starting to struggle a little bit right now. Was that because of X, Y, and Z? And now if anything like that goes wrong, now that plays a little part in what's going on in your game. And then what you speak to, the team wasn't as good. Yeah. Right? Like, so you're seeing more high danger chances, right? Like the penalty kill, which had traditionally been one of the better penalty kills in the league, not as good this year. And like he plays a part in that, but all those things lead to him being at 890, 895, somewhere in there, like definitely a sub 900. But it's a little bit of both, right? Like the idea that he missed some time and the team wasn't as good around him as it has been in the past. And I don't worry about him at all. I still would want to build my team at right, like being a Boston Bruins fan at my core. Like I still want him in net, and you've got to try to find the right pieces around him to make that team more successful next year.
Yeah, and I also, again, like I think we talked about this a little bit when they went and got Korpisalo, and I think the narrative was, oh, he's coming to Boston. He's going to be so much better because they're so good in front of him defensively. And when you looked at the numbers of the Bruins last year defensively, they were fine, but they were not the same caliber of Bruins on defense that they'd been in years past. And Ullmark and Swayman covered up a lot of those holes at times, and they bailed them out. And there wasn't that this year. And like Conor Ryan said a lot, like, oh, if the Bruins got average goaltending from Swayman, they're probably somewhere in the mix for the playoffs. And that's probably true, but you didn't get it at all. And I mean, that really was one of the big reasons. And I think when you look at like the amount of guys,
can we be fair though, right? Like, so then that becomes too, right? Like if you get average goaltending, if you get first line center production,
correct,
right? Like if you don't have the injuries of Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, like that certainly affects what's going on around. Like goaltending is such a lonely position, right? Like you're the last line of defense, and when it doesn't go well, it seems like it's all on you. But you didn't get average production from your penalty kill. You didn't get average production from your first line center. Right? Like all those things led to what we saw this year, right? Like to put it all on Swayman, like if he wasn't your goalie, like how bad would you have been? Are you in the mix for the first? Are you in the mix for?
You're getting Michael Misa.
Yeah, right. Are you in the mix for the number 1 overall pick? Which people might prefer. I was
just saying, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, maybe people would prefer that, but I mean, he's a great goalie. I for the next 7 years, I think you should be. I think you should be happy as a Boston Bruins fan that he's going to be the one that's in net for you.
And I the other part you hit on it was, you didn't get first line center production. You also didn't get a lot of production outside of anybody. Like Pastrnak found his game, sort of right near the midway point and just when it was on fire, but he started off slow. Geekie was scratched a number of times under Jim Montgomery, and it wasn't really until the second half that Geekie found his game. Guys like Zacha, Coyle, Frederick, Brazeau. I remember at the first week or two of the season, the fourth line was your offensive catalyst.
Yeah,
there were so many. Yeah, there were so many guys. Cole Koepke, exactly. Yeah. Johnny Beecher was actually contributing offensive numbers at the beginning of the year. And so to me, there were just so many guys that just were not, they were at their worst, but their absolute worst. And that's why I like what they did at the deadline. Shake it up. Like things had gotten stale completely. But to me, like when I think of the story of this Bruins team, we look at last year where it was like they're overachieving. Like this team shouldn't be as good as they are. They went in the complete opposite direction this year, and it was a team-wide thing. I mean, Carlo wasn't as good as he'd been in years past. When he was in the lineup, McAvoy wasn't as good as he'd been in years past. I mean, outside of like Koepke, Pastrnak, Geekie, Hampus Lindholm before he got injured, there weren't many guys who I would look and say, man, they were like a net positive. They were at their best. It It didn't feel like that this year. It was sort of everybody was down.
And I think we have talked about this for a while, and maybe even since 2022-23, like they've overachieved for a few years up until this year. And I say we as a Boston fan, I think we took the coaching for granted, right? Like Bruce Cassidy, Jim Montgomery. I mean, they did an unbelievable job getting that team. And there's obviously the leadership piece too, right? Like from a leadership perspective, did an unbelievable job of getting that team to perform at a high level consistently over the course of, 2.5 years. Like they have had a lack of true, like, outside of Pastrnak. You've had, maybe
I know what you're going to say.
Maybe even McAvoy. You've had a lack of like true talent that across the league people really truly covet. And I think this year it just caught up with them, and not having anyone to replace Bergeron and Krejci. That's why you're in the situation that you're in. You like and now you're getting into it a little bit, right? Like not having talent in your minor league system or your prospect pool at all. Like you don't have that. You don't have the cheap replacements that keeps you viable for a long time, and then you're going to consistently have to go back into that free agent pool, and that's a difficult way to build. And you've managed it because you really you had hit on the cheaper free agent pool that had played really well for you, and you had that core group of guys that were around, but you didn't have that this year. And what we talked about in 22, 23, 23, 24, where people were slotted incorrectly. Now you look at Trent Frederick when you're asked to do a little bit more than you're capable of, and you're asked to carry, and not like no one can ever tell a player you've got to produce X amount, but like asking him to create chances on a game-to-game basis for himself and his linemen, it's like that's not his game, right? And he was successful off the forecheck playing with players that are probably a little bit better than he's used to, and he did really well. And this year you're asking him to carry that offensive load, and it's not something he was capable of doing.
And I think that's why you're seeing the young guys who come up for the Bruins, your Lysells, your Farinaccis, your Durans, likely are more bottom six guys. Lysell, if he can really maybe find it, could end up somewhere in the top six. But that's why a lot of the guys in your prospect pool that you've had for a few years now are not, slotting into the top six on a good team, at least for right now. And I think that's why I liked what they did at the deadline. Like I keep going back to that of that's an A. I mean, you went out, you got more picks, you got some prospects, Fraser Mitten, Will Zellers. You bolstered your prospect pool. And that's why when we get into sort of what they should do next, a lot hinges around, who you're picking the next 2 to 3 years. Make all your picks. And that's why I think, to your point of, they have been competing for so long that they deal away firsts. They deal away seconds. I mean, they went into this deadline without a second this year. And fortunately now they have one. And
it's really hard, right? Like I think, as a listener, you might hear what I say and think that I'm blaming upper management. I'm not, because
I think they would like that. I think
but what they did in 22-23 is this is our team. We're going to go
chips to the middle of the table.
Yeah, we're all in on this team winning a Stanley Cup. And if we give up our first, if we give up our seconds to win a Stanley Cup, all good. And that team probably should have won, right? Like you're a breakaway. Yeah. You're a breakaway away in game 6 with 10 seconds left from winning that series and moving on. And you're feeling really good about yourself. So no disrespect to management. You go all in. That's what a fan base wants. You want to be in the Stanley Cup conversation every year. And that's what they've been for since 18-19, right? 17-18 even. And that's a lot of fun in the area. Now with the picks that you've accumulated, you've got to make sure that you're going to get players now that can play in your top 6. And maybe that means you swing for the fences, which is why I always enjoyed the Fabian Lysell. Like, you were swinging for the fences. You were trying to find a top six player. And that's what they're going to have to do this year. Like, obviously it looks like they'll be in that position. But they now got to hit on those picks.
Yeah, got to hit on those picks. I want to get into what they need to do going forward, because that's where the fun starts. That's where it's like, all right, there's a reason for optimism. But first, our friends over at Gametime. Carl, spring. It's nice out. Good day for a Red Sox game. Always a good day for a Red Sox game. Go to Fenway, or you can go to the Garden and see some playoff basketball, not playoff hockey, but go watch the Celtics. So go check out our friends over at Gametime. Gametime Picks is curation. It makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, all in pricing. You toggle this feature and it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, they give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. There's the lowest price guarantee, which Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time.
Game time.
It is game time. So what they should do going forward. I'll start here, Carl, because I know this is one of your favorite players in the entire league. One of your favorite players is available in free agency and looks like he's probably not going back to Toronto. And that's Mitch Marner. I remember you and I have debated him a number of times during playoff series. He was not much of a factor last year, I remember, because it was, he was having a quiet series. But you have said time and again that you think he's, an all-world player. And I agree. I think he's fantastic. This is why, with the cap space you have, which is about $25 million this offseason, and your big signings internally are really just Kiki and Lowry, which you shouldn't break the bank with those. I say go for Mitch Marner. What do you think?
Mitch Marner is much maligned. He's a great player, and anyone in the National Hockey League will be lucky to have him. What is he, top 5 in scoring? I think he competes at both ends of the ice. I think if he's right, and Toronto's a great hockey market. If he's not in Toronto, people probably love his game, right? Like, does he show up every night? No, not necessarily, but he is a top 10 player in the National Hockey League that everyone would want to have. Do I think that that's your issue, right? Like another right winger, who does he play with? That is my big question mark. Like, if you go out and get a second top end right winger, like, he's only going to be as good as centerman, and who's he going to play with? I don't know what's out there. I'm trying to look at it right now. Like, what do you have?
My idea, here's the thing, right? Like, are you going to have enough money left over? I don't like free agency. I don't like signing guys in free agency because typically the best players don't land in free agency, and that scares me. You saw the negatives to it last offseason with Lindholm and Zadorov, and you see it time and again where guys get overpaid and those contracts look bad within a year or two. Someone of Marner's caliber, though, doesn't come around almost ever. I mean, I think the last true top end winger was Johnny Gaudreau on the free agent market, and that was a bunch of years ago. And I mean, again, you look at his Marner's point total. I mean, since coming into the league in 16-17, 61, 69, 94, 67, 67, and those were shortened years, 97, 99, 85, 100. Like you mentioned earlier, like getting high end, you need high end talent. This is that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there's no one better to go out and get. Do you understand that your first line center this year, Elias Lindholm, and you're going to try to keep together, I would imagine, Lindholm, Pastrnak, and Geeky to some respect. And then that means Mitch Marner plays with Pavel Zacha and
Middlestat, maybe. Like, so here, right? And I agree with you. It's tough, right? It's a tough sell. But I think Marner can drive a line. Like, my whole idea is what Pastrnak has done on line 1. Can't Mitch Marner do that on line 2?
Yeah, no.
Like, I mean, you're paying him for it, and it's a risk. And my other thing is, and I think I've said this to you, like, off camera, but ideally, in 2 to 3 years, over the next 2 to 3 years, your picks that you make will draft and develop. And you hope they draft and develop well. And I imagine they're going to pick a lot of centers. I would guess they're going to pick a center at 4 or 5, wherever they pick, or maybe even higher. And they're going to make center picks throughout the rest of the draft this year and next. And in 2 to 3 years, when those kids come up, they get a chance to play with Pastrnak or Marner. And I do wonder if that's part of their pitch to a guy like Mitch Marner, where it's like, you could have a high-end centerman. You got to stick with Zucker, Middlestead, who are fine. They're fine. And I expect Marner would elevate those guys. But that's my whole thinking, is that you sign Mitch Marner to elevate the guys around him for the next 2 to 3 years. So you're not near the bottom of the league. You're competitive. You're a wild card team. Maybe third in the Atlantic at best, but you're not wasting Pasternak's prime. That's my whole thought process. Don't waste Pasternak's prime.
Yeah, right. Like, ownership came out yesterday and said that they're in a retool, not a rebuild, but you still got to figure out what you have and who you want to be. And if you're making a pitch to Mitch Marner, like who has been on a very competitive team, a consistent playoff team, is it in his mind that he wants to go through that retool, whatever it is that you call it, or does he want to go to a team that's in contention right away? And like that will be the big thing, or you're just going to have to overpay him, right? Like the idea that he was going to get, right, like the reports out there that potentially he was going to get upwards of 14 million in Toronto, is that something that you're going to have to do here? Because if you look at some of those top end free agent signings, and you look at teams that have been in the Stanley Cup Finals, what do they have in common? Income tax-free states,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so if you're lining up offers, which I imagine Mitch Marner is going to get a ton of them, maybe not a ton, like I would assume that most people would try to make it work if they could. If I'm deciding between those income tax-free states and, a state like Massachusetts where the Boston Bruins are in a retool, is that something that you're going to want to do? Now, from a management perspective, I will do whatever it takes to go get him. I just think I don't think you're there to be able to land that type of free agent this summer.
You might be right. I mean, again, I look at teams that have cap space this summer, right? San Jose, 44 million, Columbus, 40 million. I don't know if he's going to either of those places. Carolina's at 37. Carolina has been notoriously against signing top end wing talent, so I don't think they're going to be in with Marner. Anaheim, 36, Calgary, 34, Winnipeg, Chicago. I mean, maybe Chicago takes a run. Like that would make sense for where they're at. The Islanders, probably not. Philly, LA, and then you at 25. Detroit's right after you at 25 as well. So I think people look and go, does he want to go to a smaller market and get away from the Toronto media? And Boston is kind of close to Toronto in terms of caliber of media. There's a lot of scrutiny that comes playing here. So maybe that would be something. It also could just be who offers the most money and where do you want to go for that? What do you want the Bruins to ultimately do? What are you hoping that they kind of treat these next couple of years? Because again, I mean, as Charlie Jacobs said on Wednesday, they're not, they're going to be in it next year. They're going to try to be in it next year. You're not pro like rebuild, are you?
No, I think you're trying to thread the needle, right? Like you still have Pastrnak, McAvoy, and Swayman. So, right, like that core player at each position, you have someone that can carry the load. I don't think that you're in a position to be a Stanley Cup contender next year, or maybe even the subsequent year, 2 or 3, right? So what I would like them to do is do their due diligence in the draft and develop, and make sure that those players within a 2 to 3 year window are playing for the Boston Bruins in a top 6 and a top 4 role. And then you have this core group of young players then that for the next 6 to 10 years have got you in a position where you are a Stanley Cup contender. But by no means do I want them to go into next trade deadline and trade their first round picks away again. Like they're in this weird kind of dynamic where they're just like middling, right? Like if they went all into trading their draft picks again, they'd still be a first round or second round at best team. And I don't want to see that. You want to see them try to accumulate that core group of guys that went from 2010, 11 up until 2018-19, and that's what you'd like to see them get back to. And right, like a lot of those guys, the Milan Lucic's, Brad Marchand's, Patrice Bergeron's, David Krejci's, those were all draft picks. And I would like to see them to draft and develop a little bit better.
That's the biggest thing. You've got to make your picks. You've got to make your picks, and you've got to develop them well. I've seen some people on Twitter, and I think it's an interesting point when you talk about like who should they pick. Someone like a James Haggs, for instance, is not a typical Bruin draft pick. It would be more like Desnoyers up in Quebec. He's more of a two-way center and responsible at both ends, high floor, and that feels like more of a Bruins pick. And I just wonder if they go off the board. Not off the board, but away from where they normally would. Like you look at a guy like Porter Martone, he's big and a big winger would normally be like, oh, that guy's a Bruin. I wonder if they go in a different direction. I mean, we saw what they did at the deadline, and not this is everything because again, it was a deadline where you were tanking. But what did they bring in? A bunch of speed and skill, and I would assume that's the route they're probably going to take going forward. They tried to out Panthers the Panthers this year. Zadorov and Kastelik and Riley Tufte and Max Jones and kind of these big guys, and it didn't really work out. So I'm with you. I think the route forward is, you're not tanking. You have David Pastrnak. You also have to assume, as we said, Swayman will be better next year.
Yep.
Hampus Lindholm will be healthy and better next year.
100%.
McAvoy will be better next year. If they don't trade Zacha and or Middlestat, what do they look like next year? I'm not saying you're going to be a cup contender, but they shouldn't have the number 6 pick in the 2026 NHL draft. They should not be back in the lottery.
No, just having McAvoy and Lindholm back in the lineup on a consistent basis, hopefully for 82 games, you will be a better team. 100%. Jeremy Swayman's going to be much better, right? Like it's find the right mix at forward, right? Like ideally, if Casey Middlestat is your third line center, you're in a pretty good spot, right?
Absolutely.
Like he's a guy that can put up 40 points, really good on that second power play unit. And so if everyone's slotted in the right position, you've got a chance to get back in that playoff mix, right? Like, or should be in that playoff mix, but you're still not a Stanley Cup contending team. And that's why hopefully you're drafting as high as you possibly can this year, and you're hitting on that pick, and taking a little bit of a risk. Someone that is a high-end offensive creator that can drive a line, which you talk about with Mitch Marner. You're gonna need someone like that. I don't know if that player exists in this draft, right? I know like Matthew Schaefer is a defenseman, which by all accounts is your first overall pick, which probably not the right fit for the Bruins, but is Misa, is Haggs, is Martone, are those the guys that can carry a first line, or at the very least carry a second line?
Yeah, you just need someone who's going to contribute in the top 6 in the next couple of years. But then I don't, no matter who you pick, I don't think they're coming in next year and magically being your number 1 center or number 2 center. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I want to get into Sweeney and Neely before we head out. But first, for those of you listening to this show, we ask that you subscribe to the pod, like, and leave a review if you'd be so kind. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. It's funny, it's the offseason, Carl, but there's gonna be so much because there's probably a new head coach, high draft pick, free agency, trades. What is the future of a lot of the guys on this roster? So make sure to turn on notifications so you know when videos drop. So the other day, or on Wednesday, Charlie Jacobs spoke to the Boston Globe and said this about Sweeney and Neely. Jim McBride, who reported it, wrote, while understanding the criticism of some in the fan base and media, Jacobs pointed to the success of the last decade, including a cup final appearance in the record-setting season of 22-23, when he said, quote, "It's hard for me to wrap my head around why people call for Neely and Sweeney's heads." Are you team let them continue on as GM and president, or would you rather them move on and the Bruins find new people?
Well, I think the reason why people would be hard on them is they've been the consistent throughout this stretch, right? Like 14-15 into present day, Neely and Sweeney have been working side by side. I would be of the ilk to say, give it 1 to 2 more years, in the sense that, like, I think some of the trades I think some of the free agent signings have worked out. I think where you might question that leadership is like in and around the draft. And do you have the right people that are evaluating? Do you have the right people that are developing that talent? I think that's the thing that has really backfired on Sweeney and Neely. I don't think it's anything at the pro level. I think they've done a really good job creating a team that could be consistent for, I'm not good at, what is that, 11 years, 10, 11 years. So I think they deserve the opportunity to continue. Like now, if you're in the same position 2 years from now, you're certainly going to question who they are and what the direction of the team. Like, you're not going to question the decisions that they've made over the course of time. But I would give it a couple more years, see what they can do with the draft picks. But at this point in time, like developing what I'm questioning is the drafting and the developing of those players at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair criticism, and that's why I give them a chance to get out of this. You know, I mean, you've competed for so long, the cupboard has run thin. It's finally affecting the NHL team. I do put a lot of this season on them. You look at, I believe that Zadorov money should have went to a top 6 forward or some depth scoring, and that hurt them throughout the year. So I do think that there's definitely blame for this year, and I put that on them, but it's not enough to make me fire them, at least as of right now. And I know fans are upset. Fans don't want them. Fans, you know, as you said, it's the one common theme. But I just, to me, like, you hit it with they're consistent. And again, if you're going to move on, I've said this time and time and again, if you're going to move on from Sweeney, who's a top 10 GM in the NHL, you got to make sure the next guy is better. Because if he moves on and goes somewhere else, or the new guy comes in and it's a mess. And why also why do that in a year where you have your most important draft pick since Joe Thornton? Like that's another thing. Like I don't like the idea of overhauling everything, bringing in a whole new staff less than 3 months before the draft. I don't like that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would counter with a little bit, right? Like a lot of the blame goes on the coaching, right? Like in professional sports, you're hired to be fired as a coach. And you talk about, hey, if you fire Don Sweeney, you better make sure that next guy is really good, because Don Sweeney's probably going to go somewhere. Did we not just see that with Jim Montgomery? Fired him.
Yeah.
He went to St. Louis with the team. I think St. Louis had a one point difference, right? Like 1 point higher than the Bruins at the trade deadline, and they went off and they're in the playoffs, and you're not, right? So Jim Montgomery was really good. I said it before. I think we took the coaching staff for granted, and your next hire as the Boston Bruins coach, whether that's Joe Sacco or someone else, you better make sure they are really good.
Yeah, I mean, Montgomery was fine. I do believe he was halfway out the door to St. Louis. I think that was the case. And and that's not all his fault. That's not all his fault. He went in the year without a contract. I don't know if the Bruins were dying to keep him around. Threw him under the bus yesterday, which is not a good look. I thought that was a stupid thing to say. But I don't think I think Montgomery is a solid NHL coach. I think he's somewhere in the 7 to 15 range, and he moves throughout that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I am curious to see what direction they go in this offseason with coach. Do you have any guess? Do you have any preference as to who they pick? Are you going to be the next Bruins head coach?
Yeah, I would take that 7 to 15 range. And if I was top 7 to 15 NHL coach, I would certainly take that. No. Do I have a preference? I don't. I mean, obviously, half kidding about the Jay Pandolfo. But I think the success that he's had, and I know BU people will be upset at me, but the success that he's had at BU going to 3 straight Frozen Fours, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And he's had 3 different teams, three types of different characteristics within that room at BU, and he's handled them all really well, and his teams perform.
Yeah, sorry about this weekend, by the way.
That's okay. That's all right. I just think Whether Jay would consider that or not, I don't know, but it's someone that you would have to certainly kick the tires on, and having a conversation with him and his family to see if that's something that they would want to do. Like, has institutional knowledge of the organization. Obviously, in his own right as a player, would garner respect for the way he played his National Hockey League career as a penalty killer. And I mean, that is someone that I would look at. And obviously, being able to deal with younger players and to get them to perform at a higher level. And what you're talking about, what we've just talked about, right? Like the idea that you need to draft and develop, you got to make sure someone's in that room that can communicate with them. And I would imagine that Jay to get college kids, 18 to 24-year-old kids, to perform on a year-to-year basis, he's someone that communicates really well.
Did you cross over at BU with Sacco or Pandolfo at all?
No, Jay was the year before I got there. So I know Jay a little bit because I went to high school and college with his brother Mike. But I did not cross over with either one of them.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, I'm curious to see what route they take. I mean, obviously, like Pandolfo is one name. Everybody looks at David Carl at Denver. I'm always skeptical of like the big hot college coach. I think Carl is a phenomenal coach, 100%. But someone's going to be offering him a ton of money, most likely, and whether or not he actually wants to leave Denver, he seems to be very passionate about that. I wonder, again, like, do you go internal? Like, if the Bruins go on a run, do you look at Ryan Mujanel? They loved Jay Leach. Do you look at that? I don't know if you want to bring in a guy who's not had head coaching experience, or at least the NHL level to that. You also like Marco Sturm's been a great coach I think it's the AHL. He's been a great head coach, and Mark Savard's been successful. So I am curious what they end up doing. Mike Sullivan with the Penguins, does that fall apart and suddenly Mike Sullivan's here coaching his son-in-law? I don't know. I'm very interested though. It'll be interesting to see who they pick and when that all sort of kicks into gear.
Yeah, I would just make sure, right? Like, and obviously reiterating this, you just got to make sure that next coach is like an A+ communicator, right? Like whatever their message is in that room is someone that can garner the respect of the locker room, but be able to communicate with those young players and what their expectations are on a night-to-night basis. I mean, coming into professional hockey at the age of 22, having graduated after 4 years of Boston University, was hard enough, right? And to walk into what we would call a passionate fan base at the age of 18, 19, 20, and those players having to, what we want them to do, play in the top six, right? Like, there's going to be someone that is good communicator, good listener, and can clearly ask and tell their players what to do. So that would be my only requirement, just a good communicator.
Yeah, that would help. Well, this has been fun, Carl. It's been a long time coming that we've had to do this. And
I need the whiteboard. Next time we just need some video, a little whiteboard, and then everyone would have a little bit more fun.
Maybe we'll have you break down like every draft prospect, like little clips, man. Like, oh, let's break down James Haggs, and here's what I like, and we go on the whiteboard and we have video. Maybe we can set that up or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Prospect breakdown.
That's exactly it. It's all that hockey you played in your life. You've come to this moment.
I think you've probably followed more than I do, outside of 2 years down the line drafting Carter Meyer. Who are you picking this year? Do you have a preference?
I mean, I kind of half jokingly, half serious back when Conor Ryan reminded me of this when Swayman was on the outs and it would look like it was going bad. I said, trade him to San Jose, get the number 1 pick, and draft James Haggs. So I'm sticking with that. I think Haggs would be the fit, but I mean, I obviously I know Haggs a lot more than I know Desnoyers or Frendell or Misa, and obviously Misa I would take number 1, like for sure, if I was the Bruins. But as of right now, like I have a tough time, and I know people get on me for this because of his size, but if Haggs falls to you at 4 or 5, man, that's a hard guy to say no to. Like it's hard to pass that up. Someone with that kind of skill and that kind of elite edge work and skating. I mean, Frendell definitely has the best shot and is playing at the highest possible level and having success, which is a good indicator. And Desnoyers, I think, is probably the Bruins are best equipped to handle a guy like that. I think that's a typical Bruin.
Okay.
But I have a tough time with not taking Haggs there, which I don't think he's going to be there, but that's where I'm at right now. That could change. It's April. We have until June for the draft, so maybe it'll change. Do you have a preference?
I don't. It needs to be bare minimum number 2 center. Has to be.
I agree. And this it goes back. Continue. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say I don't like being a winger. I don't think necessarily helps them really, but who knows what you get in free agency. I guess what you're looking for is best available player, but if that best available player is a center, I think you have to take them.
I agree. And I think, back to the Neely Sweeney discussion, if Sweeney is to get fired the next 2 years, I think the reason will be, hey, look at all these guys he's drafted. Let's say, 2 or 3 years from now, Letourneau isn't looking great. The guy they draft this year isn't looking great, or other picks aren't really hitting at the NHL level. And then that's when I think the wheels start moving on that. Ownership likes him too much. He is homegrown. He's a former Bruin, and he's had too much success. Obviously, if they miss the playoffs next year and the year after, that's not going to help his case. But I think the big thing will be that and the draft and missing a draft pick. So we'll see. Well, Carl, this has been great. We'll have to do it again at some point and catch up and all that fun stuff, the Framingham guys. So
I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. That's been Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.